Justin, welcome to the show. You run a marketing and advertising agency called Shit Show Creative. We're going to get into the amazing name because it fits itself very perfectly. And you say that Shit Show Creative is for brands too bold to fit in, which I absolutely love. You have won a Grand Prix at the Cannes Lions International Festival of Creativity, which is one of the biggest advertising awards. That's absolutely crazy. And you've worked with some of the biggest brands. We can be here all day of me telling you which ones, Nike, LinkedIn, Xbox, Red Bull, the list goes on your website, you have listed the words, the biggest risk is blending in. And given your success in marketing, you are clearly doing something a lot better than other people. So I wanted to ask you, what do most marketers get wrong about marketing and advertising?
Most marketers, they rely on data, but data can lie, and data captures the past, doesn't really do a good job of the present or the future. And my hat is a shit show product. You can buy it on our site, and it says choose vibes, because I think vibes drive the world. I think it's at the heart of creativity, music, art, advertising. I think it's business. That the fact we're brought here today, you and me, is because of vibes. I'm sending out a vibe and you're sending out something that is bringing us together. And it's amazing how people think, some people try to say, oh, you need to be in an office to have spontaneous conversations and creativity, which is insane, because me and you are having it right now, right here. And Google was founded in a garage. Facebook was in a dorm. Amazon was on a cross-country road trip to Seattle. I mean, that's where the heart and soul of a company is born, in intimate, small places where people can concentrate and have good human interactions and not be distracted by Bob from accounting's surprise birthday party. So yeah, I think that's at the heart of everything we're trying to build right now. And data, by the way, there's this quote, there's three types of lies, damn lies, and statistics. And I'm very skeptical of statistics. I think that can be twisted. It hasn't, I mean, only recently have I even started using a couple of them, but I make sure that they're true, verifiable, and I try not to overuse them, because, to tell you the truth, my heart's not in the numbers. It's in goosebumps. The goosebumps don't lie. If you see something and it makes you laugh, makes you cry, makes you feel something, you're going to have an attachment with the brand or the cause or the message or the person who it's attached to or who made it.
Sure. So on the surface, I think saying that statistics maybe are an overrated way of judging what's good and bad is an unpopular opinion, right? This is kind of the center of what Shit Show Creative stands for. I wanted to ask, for somebody listening to this that might think to themselves, data and statistics are the thing that lead people to decisions. Like somebody sees that, okay, I guess let's say 76, this is just I'm making this up. So let's say you see a statistic saying 76% of marketing is now run by AI, right? Somebody would see that statistic and they would say, okay, since it's being run by AI, I can then make the next decision, which would be, okay, maybe I should kind of pivot a little bit. But with your take of statistics and relying on data, being like something capturing from the past, how do you think that people can learn to not take data as seriously and know where the real leverage lies?
I think the past is prologue, and you could look at a million companies like IBM that thought that they were going to own the world, or Kodak, and their size was actually their downfall. I mean, it comes from the Bible, David and Goliath. Like, David had the advantage because he was nimble and fast, and Goliath was slow, lumbering, and half blind, maybe mostly blind. And that repeats itself over and over and over again. I mean, Google has an existential threat right now because of ChatGPT and the others. I hardly ever use it for search. And when I do, it's like the top 5 things are paid ads, and it's hard to get to what you want. I know multiple people who have been scammed of concert tickets, because you're looking for a ticket, you want to buy it from a good vendor. And the first one is some shady reseller. And Google for first 15 years would have never done anything like that. But the money and the bills and the office buildings that everybody works and the overhead, they have to make decisions to get away from their core. The founders eventually move on. This is a pattern that repeats itself over and over. So as far as being number one, yeah, you may be number one now, and the statistics about how much money you're making, by the way, as a country too, may be impressive, but tomorrow everything could change. And in the era of AI, it's kind of crazy, because I learn about most AI tools word of mouth and often in in-person conversations. So we've reached this point where it's kind of gone back to the old school where I'm not watching the news or even Twitter to find out what's happening on AI. I show up at a meeting or a club or have lunch with a friend and they tell me. So yeah, stats will, if stats were accurate, we'd all bet accurately 100% of the time. I mean, it's like sports, right? We could look at who looks the best on paper, but that doesn't say anything about the future.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So you're kind of putting, I mean, I'm not gonna say you are, you already have put a lot of your eggs into the emotional display of things based on your content marketing. So how do you leverage emotions in advertising and actually make it seen? You know what I mean? It's easy on the surface for me to say, okay, I want to make this ad appeal to people's emotions. I want it to be sad so people feel like they might need this thing or they don't have this. So, how do you bring it from emotion to actually putting it into life, like in your advertising?
Well, emotion, to have the right emotion and to know how to tap into it, the first thing is to know what you're selling or who you're selling or what cause you're talking about, and then do a lot of research about how people feel about it. By the way, that's when stats are nice. I don't ignore stats when doing research. If I find out that, I'll just give you an example. These tobacco pouches that people have, like Velo and what's the famous competitor?
Zen.
Yeah, Zen. So I went to school in Sweden as an exchange student, and they had those, and it was mostly women, not all men. Didn't some men did it, but it was mostly women. They bring it to America as a new product. All of a sudden, men are using it, and the branding is more masculine. And I'm sure that was the result of research. They probably did a lot of research about the US market and decided it wasn't going to work with women. It was going to work with young men. And that's every product. Any successful product, you have to understand who you're talking to. And in our case, I'll give you an example. I worked on this project for a company called Cool Effect, where you can buy carbon credits by supporting carbon reducing projects all around the world. Like maybe it's a wind farm, or maybe somebody's installing efficient, affordable ovens that are also clean in parts of Central America or Africa. And so the audience, we found, they weren't responding to doom and gloom and guilt. It just wasn't a motivating factor. We started finding out that people were giving it more often as gifts to other people who presumably probably cared about the environment. And it was they all had funny names. Like, I'm a big fan. It was a pun on fans, was the windmill project.
Okay.
So with that in mind, Christmas was coming. We said we have to take advantage of this and do something fun for the holidays where people would give this as a gift, eliminating a ton of carbon. So instead of doing the doom and gloom thing, my team and we came up with Save Our Snowman, which was about a little girl whose snowman, Mr. Flakes, went missing, and her dad's desperately trying to locate the snowman. Meanwhile, his daughter's like skipping in a puddle, and he's like terrified that he's never going to be able to find it. And then over the course of this short film, you realize the snowmen are migrating to the North Pole at the Global Snowman Sanctuary, where Dr. James Atwater is keeping them cool and chilling them out, so to speak. And you learn over the course of this funny, playful, heartwarming story, real statistics from the United Nations about climate change. But it doesn't feel like you're being preached to. It's just a natural part of the story. And so that got 500,000 views. It was shared by the United Nations on their Facebook page. And it was nominated for a Webby against John Oliver last week tonight. So it's kind of funny because it was specifically for writing. So it was comedy writing. So it was me at my kitchen table versus John Oliver's room full of Harvard Lampoon grads. So that was one of my proudest achievements, especially since I had to actually travel on my kid's youngest son's second birthday. I was gone producing this thing. And so I felt so bad and guilty and terrible. But then when it actually got recognition and seen, and there was a full page ad, by the way, in New York Times that I wrote about from the girl asking if anybody's seen Mr. Flakes. And there was snowmen on the streets of New York having a protest, save our snowmen, like people dressed as snowmen. So it was across all categories. And it's my proudest achievement. And just to get back to the beginning, it was grounded in research and data and listening to what people respond to. In a related category, solar, I work on a lot of solar ads, and I found that the companies I work with have discovered that even in progressive liberal areas, wealthy liberal areas, it's not a compelling reason. Climate change is not a compelling reason to actually invest money in solar. So we always lead with efficiency, energy independence, something that's bipartisan, which is great. But even if it was partisan, that's the best message for either party. And it's all about efficiency. But if we were basing it on assumptions and not data, we would have done, we probably would have talked about climate change, most of the ads. And instead we barely talk about it, not because we're hiding from it, because it's just not a motivating factor. So to drive the emotion, it's understanding the people and what motivates them, and then that really helps you zero in on what emotion. So in this case, I wanted to make people laugh and make people think, but make them laugh first. Because in comedy we say after ha ha comes aha.
Hmm.
So laughter opens your. I mean, this is funny because it's neurologically true, but if somebody's joking, their brain is open to receiving a message they normally wouldn't. It doesn't mean that they'll necessarily agree with the message, but they will consider it. And that's what the best
Hmm.
comedians do. Like Sebastian Maniscalco is one of my favorites, and he plays the audience almost like an instrument, where he's making fun of the left and the right and the left and the right, and he's doing it like a conductor of an orchestra. It's very difficult to do that. And he gets everybody to reflect on their own assumptions and consider another point of view. But the main point is making people laugh. It just happens to also help people think.
Sure. So one thing that I was thinking about is I totally agree with what you're talking about. Data, I think it could be very important. What is the separating factor between data that you would use in your advertising versus one that you think might be irrelevant or something from the past that might not be accurate?
Well, I think a lot of generational stereotypes are really damaging, to give you an example. I think people perceive right now, they think AI isn't being adopted by older people, but I've seen it being adopted mostly by older people. And most of the older people I know, like my parents, are mesmerized by this new technology. And if you think about it, they're not threatened because they're going to retire soon, or my dad already is retired. So if we saw data that there's this perception that young people are early adopters and older people are laggards, but that's no longer true. I think because of the accessibility of technology, it's everywhere. We all learn about AI at the same time. My parents know what 6'7" is. So the jokes from a kid used to be inside jokes that parents would never get. And now there's influencers who are teachers telling parents what their kids are talking about. So I feel like the biggest change I've noticed is that there's a flattening of generations, and any data from the past about the differences between the generation, like the gap, the shop is called the gap because of the generation gap in the 60s was so extreme. But I feel like there is no gap now. Like even dads dress like their kids. I mean, some people make fun of that, but that's just a lot of parents listen to the same music as their kids. Kids listen to the same music as their parents. Like everybody has access to pop culture, and it's definitely affected what they respond to. And that's why if you do it carefully, you can make an ad that an 18-year-old and a 65-year-old will both laugh at. I think maybe the progressive ads might be a good example of that, or Geico. And for me, success, I call it KPI, but not key performance index. KPI means keep people interested. And if my goal for success is that at Thanksgiving dinner, my aunt and my niece are both laughing and talking about the same joke. Has happened, by the way, and it's often Geico. What I love about the Martin Agency in Richmond is it's just, they don't win all the awards, but they have these campaigns that last 20, 25 years, and they really work. They really get people to sign up for Geico. Before they won that account, maybe 2002 or something, insurance advertising was terrible. They didn't even try to be funny. And now somebody's got the Emu, somebody's got Jake from State Farm, somebody's got the Progressive, like you're becoming like your parents. Farmers insurance, everybody's trying to outdo Geico. So they were leaders and they changed the category for good. So I admire that campaign. And if I know we'll do a lot of branded content, documentaries, we'll do a lot of AI music and videos. But if I did any kind of TV advertising, or when we do, I want it to be that kind of like non-pretentious, non-coastal, non-elitist, make everybody laugh. it's not, they're not taking themselves too seriously. And that's the kind of work I would like to do as Geico, for example.
Sure. Talk to me about one of your famous quotes, turning chaos into creative fuel.
Well, this leads to shit show, but I've worked at big agencies, small agencies, independent ones, corporate ones. I've worked with ones with great culture, but bad work. I've worked with ones with amazing work, but sweatshop, toxic culture. And especially as a freelancer, I've had the opportunity to work at probably 40 or 50 different agencies and companies directly. And the one thing I notice is that no matter how organized and efficient and well oiled the place seems, if you stay there long enough, eventually I would reach this point. I'm like, this place is a shit show. And it may sound negative, but there's also a positive side to it. The positive side is realizing nobody has it figured out. Creativity comes from chaos. Creation comes from chaos. I also found out recently that chaos is a Greek word that means blank page. So right from the beginning, it means an opportunity. It was something waiting for something to happen. So I've learned that you can't avoid, I mean, this is a mental health thing. You can't avoid chaos in your life, but you can learn to navigate and sail through it. And you can learn to thrive in it. And when everybody else is panicking, be the voice of reason and don't let that affect you and stay grounded. Because I'll tell you a story real quick. Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, he was visiting with James L. Brooks, one of the biggest producers in Hollywood, and he was still in college or fresh out. And at the time, he had a cartoon called Life in Hell, and it was about this bunny, and it was like kind of violent, over the top cartoon violence about this bunny and all the crazy life it went through, adventures it went through. And so he's in the waiting room waiting for James L. Brooks, and he thinks that James L. Brooks, well, he knows he's there to talk to him about that cartoon, and he's afraid that he's going to buy it, and that's his baby. He doesn't want to give it away to some Hollywood producer. So he's like panicking, like, I need another idea. And he's got his pen and paper, like most creative people do, hopefully, or use notes now. And he starts scribbling his family, and it's Bart, his sister Lisa, Maggie. It was all family members. So then they're like, Mr. Groening, Mr. Brooks is ready to see you. He goes in there and he sits down, and then he's like, so what do you got? And he starts shooting the shit, just spitballing his idea of this family, this all-American family, like the good, bad, and the ugly, just an unfiltered look at the average middle American family unit. So chaos, like being on such a cliche, but pressure makes a diamond. Sometimes a short deadline is the best gift in the world, and a long deadline and a long budget, it can be a death sentence for good work. I mean, definitely in my experience, some of my best work is done in the shortest amount of time, honestly, because nobody has time to screw it up. And because if you have a great idea and you have too much time to make it, it's like a joke. You hear this joke the first time, you like it. What happens when you hear that joke the 60th time? You forget why you even liked it in the first place. So people get tired of their own ideas, whether it's a book, a painting, a cartoon, or a podcast. They get sick of it before they've even given a chance, or they forgot what sparked it in the first place. I read that something like 60% of podcasts never have more than 3 episodes or something. That doesn't mean the listeners got sick of it. They never had a chance to see it or hear it. People got sick of it was the person making it, because they lost track of what inspired them in the first place. And that's something I never want to lose track of. And I almost did, especially in middle age, in my mid 40s. Why am I in advertising again? And I had to unlearn so many bad habits and strip away the doubt and the negativity and get back to the simplicity of when I was a kid. My dad was a hotel manager, and when we check into the hotel, the first thing I do is run and get a piece of paper and a pen and start drawing. And finally, I'm now 47. I just wake up every day and I think, what weird thing can I put into the world today? And I get up now earlier and earlier, like 5:30, and I do get straight to work, but it's not work. It's really is fun. So that whole thing about if you love what you're doing, you'll never work a day in your life. I would 100% agree to that. But that doesn't mean the past 20 years of my life felt like fun. The industry I was in is fun, but that doesn't mean the coworkers or the process was fun at all. But what I'm doing is taking the best and worst lessons from everything I've learned and creating a new kind of agency for a new kind of world. I mean, You could call us an ad agency, but we're also equally a production studio. A lot of people don't know that Walt Disney started off making ads. One of his first things that he made was a 20-minute film about little Tommy's toothache for a dentist. And that's where he learned his chops and learned his skills and learned his crafts and built a name for himself before he started making his own content. And I think that's where we're at right now. I mean, nobody thinks of that Netflix Formula One show as an ad, but it's an ad. It's paid for by Formula One, and it's a very successful one. I mean, it's skyrocketed in popularity as a result. And I think if people found out it was paid for by Formula One, nobody would care because it's really, really good. So sometimes people use the word ad for something that's not good, and nobody thinks the Hollywood sign is an ad. It's for a housing development. It's a global icon. 1974 movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was paid for by Quaker Oats because they were introducing a new candy bar. The book's called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. They make the movie, it's an ad. They're like, we got to have the name of the product in it. And just one more example, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was written by a Chicago copywriter at a department store to occupy the kids so their parents could shop in peace. And it was given out to the kids for free. And it's a great story because it's a sad story, but his wife had cancer at the time. And the department store, out of goodwill, handed him full ownership of that character when legally they didn't have to. And that's something that's really inspiring. And I don't know how many companies would do that today, but it's a really great story. Funny enough, at first the department store insisted that the reindeer had a blue nose because at the time a red nose was very associated with drunkenness in cartoons.
Mm.
If you had a red-nosed character, they were drunk. And he's like, no, it's got to be red. It's got to be red. And he wouldn't back down, and he created history.
That's so interesting. In your experience, because it's awesome you're talking about. First of all, I didn't even know that that movie, the F1 movie, was paid for by F1. I didn't know that, so that was a great ad. It was very interesting. But what does it take to make an ad that's as impactful as the last examples that you talked about? Because I feel like I see so much mediocre marketing. Me as myself, so I'm a marketing major, but I just published a book, so I did a bunch of marketing on that. It didn't do the best, but it's like with all of the noise of marketing, how do you stand out?
You don't compare yourself to other ads for sure. Like I don't pay attention to what agencies are doing at all. And it's not an intentional decision. It's just, I don't measure success by what other agencies are doing. Part of that inspiration was the first agency I worked at was Crispin Porter Bogusky in Miami. And they created the King character for Burger King. They were the most award-winning agency of the decade from 2000 to 2010. They did Virgin America. They created the Mini Cooper stuff. They did the most successful anti-smoking campaign of all time. And I was an intern there, and nobody talked about other ad agencies. Nobody forwarded each other. And it wasn't a rule. It's just, I don't remember ever saying, hey, did you see what this agency did? People talking about movies, music, books. They wrote a book like for the King. They wrote a book for Burger King that was like a spoof of a motivational speaker called Dr. Angus. And he was all about how you need to embrace your meat eating self, and we need to get back to the wild and being more manly or whatever. And I read the book. It was a very entertaining book. And Liquid Death, the water company. So those guys the founders worked at the same agency as me a few years after. And I was on a call with the vice president, Andy Pearson, I think his name. And he said that every day at Liquid Death, they wake up and they say, what can we make? Our goal is to be the most interesting thing on the internet. And I noticed when he said that, he didn't say the most interesting ad or interested marketing project. He said the most interesting thing, which he seems to be saying the same thing I am. He's comparing himself probably to the best Netflix shows, to the best movie trailer, to the best video game, anything. And you're not going to reach that goal every day, but to have that as a goal is an amazing thing. And do not compare yourself to it was true when I was in school. It's true today. 95% of advertising is terrible. 5% of it maybe is great. And as much as people say, oh, nobody likes ads, it's like they do like ads. They don't think of it as an ad. They think of it as entertainment. Like I said, the ad is like a bad word almost.
Yeah. One of the things that I've heard you talk about in other podcasts as well was the idea of creativity being a life skill. And it seems like this is something that's helped you a lot as well. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, creativity, I've realized, I wish I'd realized it younger, is a mental health necessity. It's
Interesting.
also a spiritual thing. I mean, the Bible begins with creation. Like creation's the most spiritual, godly thing to do. So it's when we're making a song, writing a poem, telling a joke, these little things, even writing a card, that's creation. And I mean, it's not doesn't mean we have to take everything we do very seriously because it's a spiritual thing, but it is. And we need to make things to be happy, especially as creative people. But an accountant has some creative outlet. I mean, the more I learn about accounting, it's very creative. I mean, because there's so much gray area and wiggle room, it's insane. Lawyers, there's creativity. Any doctor with an innovative new procedure. So this stuff's very essential. So if you're constrained at your job, and it happens, and it's going to happen, especially a corporate job, find an outlet in a side project or a hobby. And the word hobby has this kind of unnecessary kind of feel to it, but call it a side project, side hustle, side passion. These things are essential because you can lose your job. People lose jobs every day. There's AI's killing a lot of jobs. And if you have the day that you're unfortunately laid off, like I was laid off with a young baby, 14. And luckily I had a passion. I went straight to the comedy club and I stood on stage and I talked about being laid off. And it was such a cathartic, healing thing. It was amazing. And it's about being vulnerable. I mean, being raw and unfiltered, and not everybody gets to see somebody on stage the day they're laid off. So it's not like it's the funniest thing in the world, but it's kind of a human experience that's really unique. That Tig Notaro, this comedian, had a famous show where she had just been diagnosed with cancer, and then she stands up on stage and just talks about it for 40 minutes about what a life shit show her life was, and people can relate to that. That's what I started doing on LinkedIn. I was like, Bob Dylan says, if you ain't got nothing, you got nothing to lose. And I wasn't getting booked like I used to. I had some clients, but they were all from San Francisco and they were all pre AI. And I wasn't getting much new work. So I just started saying whatever I wanted to say, to whatever I thought was funny. I just tried to make like 3 or 4 other LinkedIn connections who I've never met in real life. I tried to make them laugh. And then one morning I wrote this Onion style parody article, Embracing the Chaos, Shit Show Creative Launches. And I took about 10 seconds to make a ChatGPT image of 3 smug founders standing in front of a Venice, California ad agency, modernist building. And I just slapped it in the post and I posted it. I went on a walk with my wife and dog. I come back in 45 minutes. This thing has like 100 reactions. It now has 550,000. It spiked so much, LinkedIn kicked me off the site for 2 days, and I had to lobby to get back on because they thought I'd used some program to hack it. Crazy enough, for the past 8 years, I had been saying I lived in San Francisco because I thought nobody's gonna hire some crazy guy in Fort Lauderdale, and they're gonna pay him less. And I think it's crazy because it's expensive in East Fort Lauderdale near the beach. It's as expensive or more than parts of the Bay Area. There's this whole like stigma that certain cities have for other parts of the country. They think it's a bunch of hillbillies and it's cheap. It's not. It's not cheap at all. So I don't know why so I was proudly a San Franciscan, and then all of a sudden this guy from Australia hits me up, is like, I want to meet you. I'm in Venice. And I had to be like, uh-oh, what have I done? So I posted, all right, I'm coming clean. I'm Justin Kramm from Fort Lauderdale. There is no agency. It was just a joke. And then people are like, well, it shouldn't be a joke. You got to make it real. You got to have merchandise. So I made merchandise. You got to have a website. I made a website. This is all in 3 days. I got a Substack. I'd never heard of a Substack. Somebody called me up. She's like, do you want to start a Substack? I'm like, I don't even know what it is, but it sounds good to me. She's like, I'll make one. I was like, okay, go ahead. So she's my Substack editor. By the way, it's the shit list on Substack. Check it out. So I just kept doing what people told me, and I realized I accidentally started a movement. I had 600 or 700 people in a WhatsApp group within like a week and a half. And people were giving me ideas. I just took all of them. And I had all these fans around the world, or we did. And I said, what do you guys want to be called? And I had them vote, and they decided on Shitizens. So now the members of this global community are called Shitizens. The people who work for me are called Shit Stirrers. And I'm the global shit stirrer and founder of shitshowcreative.com.
Yeah, that is awesome. That is so funny. What an amazing story. You talked about before with the creative process, you mentioned, making music, and then you just mentioned your Substack and something that we were talking about earlier before off camera. I asked you what was going on with your music because I saw in your Substack you linked an album that you made, and I was listening to it, and I was so surprised because it was amazing.
Which album was it? Because I've written a bunch.
It was the Manatee
Was
one.
it dark? Okay, so one of our clients is called livingseawall.org, and it's the seawall that's designed to mimic the shape of a mangrove tree. And by doing so, it attracts oysters, and the oysters filter, each one filters 50 gallons of water every day. So this living seawall that we're raising money for is going to be 3 football fields long, and it's going to filter 1 million gallons of water every day. So I thought,
That's crazy.
to make this exciting, just like the climate change campaign I told you about, I thought create interest and get donations over the course of 2 or 3 years. Not everything has to be like a very responsible, scientific, safe post about how good this is going to be for nature. We have some fun with it. So I created this character, Carl the manatee, that's the mascot. And so Carl the manatee, he has a whole backstory. I promoted him. He's creative director of Shit Show Creative. He's my right hand manatee, and he has a side. Like I said, everybody needs a hobby or side passion, and his is stand up comedy and music. So he likes to DJ at the clubs in Fort Lauderdale at night. And so I wrote 11 songs. Well, probably more than that, but I narrowed it down to 11 songs, and I wrote all the lyrics, and I came up with the concept. And then I've been using Suno for probably 8 months now. I've written almost 1,000 songs, and I've
Wow.
learned exactly how to get the genre I want, the singer, the beat, everything. I've gotten really fast at it. And I created a country song called "Man, I Love Manatees." It's about men who are proud fans of the manatee and its cool vibe and the fact that it's relaxed and never causes trouble or harms anybody. It just minds its own business and eats plants. So yeah, it's family friendly too. I created a Carl the Manatee YouTube channel, and I took Shit Show out. It's a sub brand called SSC Family. And that's where I post all the kid friendly content. And funny enough, Shit Show, ironically, I don't use profanity in almost anything except the name itself. It's very clean, family friendly, approachable. It's non divisive. I don't get into divisive political things or anything else because we're all about comedy, kindness, and chaos for a cause. When that's global peace, cleaning the ocean, things everybody can agree on. Like education, I volunteer and I teach kids how to use AI to promote good causes around the world.
Wow, Justin, you are. I mean, if your awards, if all of the time that we spent talking to you hasn't already proved it, your ability to think about new and creative things is so inspiring, especially somebody like me. Moving away, I mean, I guess we can kind of get it overlaps with Shit Show Creative as well. But how do you think about these creative ventures? Like it's so. I mean, I would never even think about making an album. I would never think about making the animated movie of the snowman. How do you think about these things?
I don't know if you've ever heard the term beginner's mind, but it's used in Buddhism and philosophy a lot that every day
Beginner's
it's
mind.
very healthy. It's very healthy to wake up with a mind like you're an eager, curious person, and it's your first day. Even if, or especially if it's something you've been doing your whole life. That's what Picasso, like, why was Picasso drawing like these simple line drawings when he was in his 70s? Was probably because he came full circle to the simplicity of being a kid, and he made it look easy, right? It's not easy to draw something in one line without lifting your hand and having being elegant the first time. And so I wake up every day as if advertising and creativity and movies or film is brand new, because it is. I feel like if you if creativity and the creative industries are a game, imagine like Monopoly, and it's almost a literal monopoly, and then AI just knocked the board up in the air. Everything's all over the place, and it's fair game for anybody to pick it up. And nobody in Hollywood has any tools that a guy in Fort Lauderdale or a woman in Nigeria or somebody in India, we all have the same tools. I
Very
know because they're
interesting.
using them right now. I have people in Nigeria and India, and by the way, I didn't find them. They found me, and they're using the same exact tools I am. And I guarantee you the same tools Hollywood's using, except Hollywood, because of various reasons. Of course, they're trying to hang on to the past because there's more money in their closely guarded union where they don't really let new people in. They're trying to protect that. I understand. That said, I'm just a guy in Fort Lauderdale trying to build an ecosystem here. I have a dream that South Florida will be the creative AI, the AI creative capital of the world. I'll let them in San Francisco, where I used to live. There's a bunch of 22-year-olds, no offense, living in dorms, and they're just honestly just stealing code from each other. But who's making stuff with it? There may be people in San Francisco doing that, but all I hear about is the people actually just trying to keep up with the rat race of the most powerful processor, rather than what are we going to do with those processors? And by the
Sure.
way, I think it's so important to have a 22-year-old or an 18-year-old on a team. I just think it's equally important to pair them with a mentor. Imagine how great it would be if you paired them up with some 75-year-old guy or woman who was like probably 40 when the .com came out. It's not like history repeats itself exactly, but there are things we can learn from .com era so we don't make the same mistakes twice. And so we don't miss out on this opportunity. So mentorship's very important. And when people talk shit about younger generations, it's because they don't spend time with them. They don't volunteer with them. They're not curious. I mean, if they're judging them for the way they think, it's like Ted Lasso says, be curious, not judgmental. Maybe take the time to understand why they think this way. If they think this way and not one way we taught that we want them to think, is it because we didn't tell them something to begin with and we assumed something? That's never a good idea. So our youngest employee is 14-year-old. She's the chief kid officer. Our oldest is my dad. He's just turned 78. And I encourage intergenerational chaos where we all learn from each other.
So, so cool. Such a good answer. Justin, I'm really interested in, for lack of a better term, your system of thinking. Like when somebody tells you, somebody hires you, right? They say, "Hey, Justin, I want you to make this ad." What's the first thing you're thinking of? What's the second? What's the third? Do you start with the emotion? Do you start with the creative itself, the copywriting?
No, it started with strategy for sure. In advertising, one thing that happened that could be good or bad is strategy became its own department, where initially the people, the creative and the business person together through conversations with the client would come up with the strategy. But now it's kind of siloed sometimes into its own field. But smart, good, interesting research is really important. So I'll give you an example. I had a teacher at Miami Ad School who worked at that agency I mentioned, Crispin Porter, and they had just won IKEA. And at the time, there was no IKEA in the East Coast of the United States. So they went all the way from Miami. A copywriter and his art director fly to Toronto, Canada. They set up a desk in the IKEA and they watch people and they take notes and they brainstorm while they're there. And they noticed that these families would come in and sit on the couch and go to the kitchen table and pretend to eat at the dining room table and make themselves at home. So as a result, one of my favorite ads came about from that. And we open on a man and a woman in a kitchen. And the daughter comes in and she's like, "Dad, Mom, I'm pregnant." And he goes, it's all your fault. Your mom's fault. This is all because she smoked dope in college. And she's like, "Don't give me any of that. This is all your fault." And then all of a sudden, a guy in a blue IKEA shirt comes in and goes, so it looks like you're making yourself at home. How do you like it? And we're like, "We love it. We'll take it." And that's one of my favorite ads. And it's all because I call it gonzo advertising, but Hunter S. Thompson, he believed in gonzo journalism. He coined the term. And so he wouldn't just report on the story like a fly in the wall. He'd be a fly in the margarita glass, drinking the margarita while in Cancun at a bikers convention.
Interesting.
So I believe in immersing yourself in the environment. This is like from the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I don't know if you know that book, but it says never, you never think badly of your product or the people that use it. A lot of times people are selling something and they don't believe in it and they don't like the customer. They think they're dumb. That's never going to work. It's never going to work in life and it's never going to work in business. You have to find a way to think like them and understand why they're into it and not judge, be curious. So so I'll give you an example. A client of mine is an Ecuadorian artist who does abstract art. And then you fly to Ecuador and you engage in a spiritual practice involving mushrooms and gold ingestion. So they want me to represent them in the US and encourage people to take part in these spiritual retreats. But how am I going to talk to people about this or come up with a strategy unless I experience it? So they invited me to Ecuador, and then I show up and they're like, wow, I didn't know you were serious. And I'm like, damn serious. I'm the shit show. We don't kid around here. So I take part in this 12-hour spiritual ceremony. I take part in the golds ingestion. I take part in getting to know and living with the family, like his team. I was a 47-year-old soccer dad exchange student living with an Ecuadorian family. They're taking me to all the restaurants that they know, taking me to the markets that they shop at. I'm having all the local food. They become like family to me. There's no replacement for that. I mean, how am I going to come up with a strategy or talk about that and convince people to go there when I never bothered to go, right? You know, the Game of Thrones book, there were so many people that wanted to adapt that book, and George R. Martin said no to everybody. And then these two guys show up and they're not really well known. And then they have a meeting with them and he gives them, he's like, go ahead and make it. And they're like shocked. And they said, why did you trust us so much? He's like, because you read the book. Because he could tell that they read the book. Nobody had taken the time to read the guy's book because it's long. But they want his baby and they're not even going to like get to know the characters and the ins and outs. And it's just a respect thing for an author. So that being said, every strategy starts with, for me, a story. And the story should be, in my opinion, real life. One of our clients makes squid jerky, calamari jerky, like dried squid is like a healthy source of protein. And you better believe I had him mail it to me and my family. All the other comedians and artists and musicians that work for us, they all had it and they tried it. And then we hop on an hour call called the Shitstorm, where we compare notes, talk about the squid, make fun of the product. Cause it's like a friend. You want to make fun of them. That's making fun of each other is part of getting to know them, becoming friendly with them, bonding. And then we had all of our unfiltered notes and all these like great ideas. And the client, we don't call them clients, we call them creative soulmates. The founder of the Hermit Squid Calamari Jerky said he loves a lot of the ideas and he was so curious. He wanted the whole transcript and he read it in and out. And then it's really cool because some things that we might have glossed over, he really liked. So I love that transparency. Most people try to hide everything they can from the clients they work with. Like I said, that's the whole point of Shit Show. Like, we're not going to hide our process. This is it. It's just 5 people on a phone making jokes, making fun of the product, sometimes liking it, having weird ideas, bad ideas, ugly ideas, beautiful ideas. I just love letting them in on the process because the process is important, especially in a world of AI when some people just press a button. I'm like, sure, I use AI, but it starts with human beings just shooting the shit. And by the way, he doesn't want to use AI. So some of our clients are okay with it. Some don't. Some are okay with half and half. We're going to remain flexible and not be defined by the tool. We want to be defined by our point of view, which is comedy, kindness, and chaos with the cause.
Justin, my last question to you is, do you think that, I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, but as far as the misconceptions of marketing goes, you argue that you should just be not against the rules, but you should adopt the idea that there are really no rules in marketing. You can do what you want. Obviously, there's guidelines, there's regulations, but as far as your ideas, don't be limited by just your competition.
Yeah, I mean, the only rule is to deliver on the brief. And when I say the brief, that's not something you just make for the client. That's an agreement between you and the client about what you're trying to achieve. And there's no rules about how to get to that point.
Sure.
So that's the order in the chaos is this 1-page brief, and it should be 1 page. I've worked at places where I'm not joking. They had 72-page briefs.
Jeez.
And it's called a brief. Like they've gotten so far from the word brief that they don't even realize it literally means brief. Like, sure, that's it. And it comes from the military, by the way. Like the president gets a brief, like 1 page on another country. And like, we can't talk about donuts in less than 72 pages. And they're talking about like Iran nuclear program in a page. You know what I mean? And it's because it's not because it's not important. It's because it's that important and the time is that important. It's so pressing that you can't get lost in a 72-page deck. You got to be clear and concise. So that's the only rule. What tool you use, whether you use this. Some people are like, we never use jingles. We never use animation. We never use more than one logo. You know who uses more than one logo? Liquid Death. And they're doing okay. They have two logos and they say, when do we use one or the other? Whenever we feel like it. And they're
That's
valued at
awesome.
over $1 billion right now. So I would say that that's a good practice to follow. I call them worst practices, where most people say follow best practices. Their best practice is called worst practices because it's doing the opposite of what everybody tells you to do. We
Sure,
have
I think
two
that's so
logos
smart.
too, you know?
Really?
Shit Show, yeah. Shit Show has a logo for our cinematic film content. And then we have another logo that you'll see more often for our social, comedic, fast social content. But when you're in the movie theater, you'll see a different logo. And some people think I'm crazy, but I'm like, well, Liquid Dust's crazy and they're doing okay. So I'll take it.
And I think there's always those companies that kind of defy the odds by doing the opposite of what everybody says they should be doing. So I think it's a good testimony as well. Justin, dude, you are so, so cool. Tell the viewers where they can find you at.
Find me at shitshowcreative.com. That's our company website. Definitely look at Shitlist, Substack. It's a newsletter. If you haven't heard of Substack, it's just it's a way to get our writing, our comedy, our content, our videos. It's not just me on there. We'll get shit stars from around the world submitting guest articles. Elon, you could submit an article if you want, because we're here to promote each other. We're here to kick off your career. You got this podcast, your own personal brand. We would love to include your writing in there and share it with your audience. We all want to rise together. So yeah, if you could, of course, find me at Krampstagram on Instagram, or we're on YouTube. Carl the Manatee's out there. Yeah, but if you want to support the Shit Show, the best way is to become a free subscriber of the Shit List.
Justin, thank you for the words. And for my listeners, I will see you guys next Tuesday. Thank you for listening.